Hello, welcome back to the channel. I'm Zach Markowski, and this is Sharper Pen Image Consulting. In the last few videos I put out, I was reading from Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, and I was discussing what it means to live beyond man, what it means to live beyond the old morality. And by that, what Nietzsche was discussing was to say, by the very formation of a culture and a state beyond that of the family, that for that to happen takes a unification and a pacification. In short, civilization is educational, and war is an education, right? And then war is also a literary activity. So in this, what we see is that history was not this ideal process. Take a look at the Middle Ages and see that if the church could have maintained their hold for all of time, they would have. And similarly, in our modern times, if you can imagine, if the phone company or the telegram company could have kept a line, or the radio, let's say, could have kept a monopoly on those technologies for another century or two, they would have loved to, right? And what I'm saying is the very changes and fabrics of people and society and how they do business forms a wide base of people that creates a precipice of the creation of new needs, which creates new types of people in the sense that they live beyond the old morality. So as it's kind of like kicking out the ladder after you've climbed to the top. The in a game, in competition, that's the whole point. It's king of the hill, right? So taking place in man and in the species, let's say, or different types of men and how they're bound in a society, or a civilization, right? Because Nietzsche says the will of a civilization doesn't rest in the people, but in the few who can, coerce the masses. But what he also is pointing out, though, in the modern age is recognizing that these old moral and grand facades, these narratives, these stories, even the politics themselves, then become meaningless because, in the creation of an intellect this strong, um, it was then seen through in time. And you could say that in theory, right, the whole argument of the church was that man's mind wasn't meant to be free. This is persecution and heresy through time. I wanted to actually start with this aphorism here from the Gay Science, what our cheerfulness signifies, because it kind of paints a picture of, that contrary to idealism, all idealism and popular belief is to say that, we are not a unity. In fact, we've been fighting and warring amongst each other and against each other for different purposes to different ends for a long time. So in 343 in the Gay Science, Nietzsche writes, what our cheerfulness signifies. The most important of more recent events, that God is dead, that the belief in the Christian God has become unworthy of belief. Remember, with God also dies time, purpose, mission, objective, right? The belief in the apocalypse becomes abolished, even though you could say, I guess, from a field theory, the idea that these things are morphically resonant in time, not to speak jargon or get off into the weeds, but I think it was, I don't remember if it was who it was who said, a possibility once becomes a necessity forever. In modern work terms, if you do a job and you do it well, you'll get stuck with that job forever. Being that we aren't one, that this isn't some essential endeavor, it opens up the horizon, actually. Yes, God, time, all these things mean nothing now and can't mean anything, even though these bridges that took us here still exist as archaeology in the world. The signs of them are everywhere. Everywhere modernity is haunted by its own past and its own future in postmodernity. But in terms of talking philosophy and otherwise, if I say more, the more I talk about postmodernity, the more we're just talking about modernity, right? Kind of end of the line. And that's why Nietzsche's saying, what's otherwise so bad? Aren't things better than ever? As the people say, everyone's happy nowadays. Things are better than ever before. And while the greater little amounts of suffering have been mitigated for greater amounts of masses, that's not the issue here. This isn't about statistical reality. It's about perceived and felt reality, because with the death of God goes the death of time, the death of meaning, the death of purpose, the death of, basically it leaves everyone to realize that, hey, that was a pretty good show, and it turns out we're animals. And the more you have to realize what kind of consciousness you are in your animal body, well, this probably is the going beyond, right? Maybe this is where people are left to just wonder. And this is why for so long everyone controlled each other, because we get scared when people wander far away and come back looking and speaking and sounding different, right? Or when it's one thing for a stranger to be strange to you, it's another thing for your own people or your own culture or your own state of being to become increasingly alien to you. And that's kind of what Nietzsche talks about in Twilight of the Idols, which is what we're reading from after the Gay Science here, is that, he's talking about contrasting the Hellenic position to the modern contemporary one, where he sees everywhere society is two steps. So it's in, deep rooted in historic decadence, and, it's a historic force. So there's no fighting or stopping it, right? Just like conservatism, uh, like novelty, habit, conservatism, somewhere in there is our reality, and that's flux, right? These processes unfolding. But this is just a way of speaking, because I can't spend all day explaining. Going on. To the few at least whose suspecting glance is strong enough and subtle enough for this drama, some sun seems to have set, some old profound confidence seems to have changed into doubt. Our world must be seem to them daily more darksome, distrustful, strange, and old. In the main, however, one may say that the event itself is far too great, too remote, too much beyond most people's power of comprehension. So he's basically almost describing what the madman says, right? Oh, it hasn't arrived yet. I've come too early, right? That's what he's saying. This is too far away for people to understand. I think the shockwave, as I've said before here and on other podcasts I've done, the shockwave of God's death has been catching up to us over here in America. Europe already went through it, and they're about to go through it again, because again, a necessity once becomes a possibility forever. People like to say we've progressed, we've changed, we've evolved. We're coming from the bloodiest century to ever exist, right? That is modernity and postmodernity. And I don't think any of our position or how that played out has changed, right? War, famine, plague are all still real. None of that has been abolished. And if anything is real, disaster is real, right? So, going on here, what he's talking about, one may say the event itself is too great, too remote, beyond apprehension, for one to suppose that so much as the report of it could have reached them, not to speak of many who already knew what had already taken place, and what must all collapse now that this belief had been undermined, right? Because remember, in Twilight Idols, he's talking about, tapping on these idols and seeing how they resonate. And he finds out that, turns out these were errors, and now these structures, these beliefs, they've all become hollowed out over time, and they resonate hollow to Nietzsche. And this is why he approaches with the transvaluation of all values as he does. So, going on. Undermined because so much was built upon it, right? We come from, in case you guys don't know, the world of the internet, the world of golden circuitry, but Byzantium here that we sailed to, so to speak. Um, it was built by a world of print heads, as Terence McKenna pointed out, and as McLuhan said that and before that it was television, and that was a world of print heads. So basically, literacy took over the globe by a small minority who set the tone in the media, and then they in turn basically died out generationally, right? Because they became the bridges, because people aren't literate like that anymore. People don't read 1,000 books like Nietzsche. People don't read all the technical manuals like they used to either, right? They read what's necessary because there's too much information. It's not even knowledge or wisdom, it's just information. And if you want to learn how to do something, you can hire someone or learn it, right? So there's something bigger he's talking about, right, than this. He's talking about the grander underpinnings of the human ego. Maybe it is vanity to speak of the soul, as he kind of, well, as we've elaborated on in the last few videos. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves again. So he's describing what's happening, right? That these structures have become hollow. So much was built upon it, so much rested on it, right? So that print world basically went away, because now we lived in a TV world, and now we live in a social media and internet world. And it's still a world not dominated by poetry and philosophy and culture, but by advertising, by real powers of capital held in the hands of a few. And I'm not trying to get Marxist. It's just, money is power, appearance is power, image is power. Everyone knows these things, right? So, because so much was built upon it and rested on it and become one with it. For example, our entire European morality. And basically this describes the why technologies can be bad, right? It's not that watching certain programming on TV is bad. It's that all TV is bad. See what he's saying there? It becomes one with it. The medium is the message. You're the message. You're the programmed member of your class of individuals who fits somewhere in your society, who does or doesn't go with the flow of things, who does or doesn't impede, who is or isn't good or evil. But all these things are, well, we're going to get into it, lies at worst, errors at best. So, for example, our entire European morality, right? So much rested upon it, but it was an error. So he goes on, this lengthy, vast, and uninterrupted process of crumbling, destruction, ruin, and overthrow, which is now imminent. Who has realized it sufficiently today to stand up as a teacher and herald of such a tremendous logic of error? And now we're in basically Nietzsche or Zarathustra's days of the soothsayer, where he forecast, there's going to be a lot of misery, a lot of Schopenhauerian suffering, a lot of people saying cease and desist, a lot of the degeneration and pains and suffering of the will, ceasing to want to create and procreate in the world, and exhaustion, right? And then with this, so this is the reality of the death of God, is that the advent of a culture of nihilism followed by panic, and also the disbelief in man, right? That he's good, that he's useful, that he can even do anything about it, right? So these things go hand in hand to create a impervious net where individuals can no longer exist. This is the problem of modernity and post-modernity, right? Because I get it, the print heads, the old school people, and then any previous humanity, they just wouldn't understand or identify with present day humanity. But this is also nobody's fault. But what I mean is that, identity, roles, none of these things are the same anymore, how they were once. Even you could say that, like, that the nature of authenticity has never changed and will never change. And that's what gives something like authenticity its character, right? It's a being operating according to their instinct or their organic functions, right? It's just being what it is or doing what it does. It's not being pretentious to something else when, we live in an age of dissatisfaction and pretension. If formerly the church sold salvation of the soul, then it was salvation of the body through monetary means. The gospel turned prosperity gospel, and here in America, for example. But there's something even more insidious I'm trying to get underneath here, right? As you see, we're clearing away rubble. We're blowing away the dark clouds on the horizon to see what's there, right? He's saying it was a mistake. So the duality in which they exist, right? That the responsibility that goes hand in hand with the irresponsibility and the shame and the blame, that these were all errors and persecutions themselves. So I'm going to keep going. So this lengthy, vast, and uninterrupted process of crumbling, destruction, ruin, which is now imminent, who has realized it to stand up to it, as the prophet of a period of gloom and eclipse, the likes of which has probably never taken place on earth before. This was Nietzsche's time. I know people don't want to hear it and they're scared of it, and likely as we all should be, but our time is no different. Now we're seeing it at an even grander scale, because I think the world's population has probably doubled since then. And then we've retained a lot of people compared to how we used to send millions to die at war and other ways we used to dispose of bodies, living bodies, carceral, the control of the body, essentially. Control of the minds, control of the body. That's why Orwell said, he who controls the past controls the future. Because if you can shape people's, this is the noble lie, right? If you shape people's very perception, then there's no escaping that, right? That is the for and the against. Nietzsche saying they exist or they disappear together. So what's left? And that's not, for the European morality and standpoint, that's nothing. That's nihilism. It's not saying that nihilism hasn't always existed. It has. It's just realized in our day and our time with our classes and of individuals and people at this scale, that's never been witnessed before. And you see that lots of people don't know, don't care. Like I said, if we're all realizing that these are animals, then there's a lot of people trying to control them, a lot of people just selfish and for themselves. Like, you'd have to be a fool or, into gaslighting fools to play those games, right? Whig history, it's progress. No, we're realizing it's animals and control of animals. As Nietzsche said, as we discussed in the last video, civilization is basically a simulation of reality, animal reality for breeding and selection purposes, right? Law and order, essentially. So, um, now we're witnessing all the stuff that brought us here, including print, including TV, including social media, including selling lies like social democracy to the entire world, to collapse, to create a massive Ponzi scheme called the world economy, to then collapse that, right? That's unprecedented. I've mentioned 2008 before on this channel. It's just interesting to see what you can do to artificially prop up hyper reality in the meantime. Um, so what I'm saying is it's happening now. It's just people can't see it or see it at scale. I guess from another perspective, you could say it's absurd to think anybody ever could. This is part of the absurdity of trying to hold people responsible. It's impossible because they can't see or understand themselves, let alone the whole world, human reality. You expect to put the world on people and history on people's shoulders like Atlas, who actually believes that's possible, right? It's a recipe for insanity. So going on, he says, even we born riddle readers, who wait as it were on the mountains posted twixt today and tomorrow, and engirt by their contradiction, we the firstlings and premature children of the coming century, into whose sight especially the shadows which must forthwhile envelop Europe should have already have come. How is it even then, without genuine sympathy for this period of gloom, contemplate its advent without any personal solicitude or fear? Are we still perhaps too much under the immediate effects of the event? And and are these effects, especially as regards to ourselves, perhaps the reverse of what was to be expected? Not all sad and depressing, but rather like a new and indescribable variety of light, happiness, relief, enlivenment, encouragement, and dawning day. In fact, we philosophers and free spirits feel ourselves irradiated as by a new dawn by the report that the old God is dead. Our hearts overflow with gratitude, astonishment, presentiment, and expectation. At last the horizon seems open once more, granting even that it is not bright. Our ships come once at last to put it out to sea and face every danger. Every hazard is again permitted to the discerner. And that's everything is permitted. That's ancient. That's not even Dostoevsky, because I know he famously said it as well. But that's ancient. I can't remember off the top of my head who said it, but the sea, our sea, again lies open before us. Perhaps never before did such an open sea exist. Right. So this is what modern philosophers and thinkers have found.